March the 4th be with you. I'm Matt with State of Flux, here with yet another review of my Star Wars lineup. This is the penultimate, as of now, installment. This is my review for Solo, a Star Wars story. This movie is more interesting in the behind-the-scenes information about it than anything that happens in the narrative of the film. It was once described to me, and I cannot put it in any better words than these, as the most medium movie ever. It's not, like, flat-out bad. It's not good. It kind of exists. It is just so meh. And that is kind of where this movie lands. However, I would argue that it is probably... an argument could be made, anyway, that this is the worst Star Wars movie. There's certainly movies like Attack of the Clones where the technological issues with that film, the narrative issues, the acting issues with that film are much more apparent than this film. That movie's just much more abrasive in its functions that don't work than this film is. And then there's other films where the some of them maybe we'll talk about in the future, where the narrative is just so misguided and broken that the film can't function on its own. Or films like The Force Awakens, where there is not an ounce of originality in that film. It is just a replica of a great movie from the past. This kind of exists in like a vacuum of only this movie. There's only one other movie that I can think of that is quite similar to this, and that would be Justice League, where you have two creative visions that are so diametrically opposed to each other that the movie doesn't really work one way or the other, and so you get a weird theatrical cut that is what it is. It has its qualities, it has its like non-qualities, and then you have the true vision director's cut, sort of, and that has its qualities as well as its negatives, and you can understand where a studio might land on that. This, we've only seen half of that story, but this is very much that same situation. This movie was originally to be helmed by Lord and Miller, coming off of the Lego movies and their amazing tackle of Spider-Man in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. These guys were put in charge of doing a Star Wars movie, Solo. That was somewhat intriguing, but even in that announcement, I was like, I don't see it. Like, they have a fun, vibrant quality that I think that Disney was really found appealing when they originally handled it, but their tone is just so different than anything in the Star Wars mythos, and the Disney films really do have, if they have anything, it is a consistent tone. There's a dreariness, a drabness, there's a used world quality of their films. They have brimming energy, a little contemplation, some certainly more than others, a nice drive for action, and a fuel of nostalgia. And Lord and Miller bring some of those things to, some of those qualities to their films. But the dreary, drab nature of them, these Disney Star Wars films, they just really don't have. And I think you had a script that was written that they just didn't necessarily believe in all aspects of. Anyway, creative conflict happened and they were booted from the project. And who was brought in to helm the picture? None other than George Lucas's own protege, Ron Howard. Ron Howard came into acting because of George Lucas, so it does feel kind of right for him to helm one of these films, and he does a serviceable job with what we see. However, this film, big problem, not unlike the big problem with Force Awakens, comes from its narrative. Lawrence Kasdan and Jake Kasdan supplied the screenplay to this, and this is Lawrence Kasdan's last effort in the Star Wars franchise, and he was really what brought life and energy into The Empire Strikes Back, where it was needed most, and that was dialogue. Dialogue in A New Hope. There's great lines here and there, but dialogue was not that film's strong suit. What Lawrence Kasdan brought to Star Wars and to Lucasfilm was a great energy to voice. You see it with Empire Strikes Back, you see it with Raiders of the Lost Ark, you see it with Return of the Jedi, and coming back into the fold, you see it with The Force Awakens. I'm not a big fan of that film, but one of the things I do have to respect is the use of dialogue and how dialogue fuels the film, and it feels very sort of natural. And so he came back to this. However, the one thing that he doesn't have is the creative flow to tell an original story. It became apparent with Force Awakens and this film that Lawrence Kasdan is a tremendous writer. He's gone on to be a tremendous filmmaker. He's made some movies I really, really love. Check out Mumford, check out Body Heat, Silverado. This dude's a great filmmaker. I like him. But within, like, a lot of people kind of put him on a pedestal after the prequels came out, saying, sort of citing that George Lucas has never been good with dialogue. Wow, look at the prequels. Look at A New Hope. Those ones sound bad. Lawrence Kasdan's really the thought man. And with those two films, Force Awakens and Solo, it's apparent that that is not the case. He's the dialogue man, and he can deliver dialogue. But with both of those films, both of those examples, he completely lacks any kind of creative energy to tell a story. Lucas was the ideas man, and Kasdan brought the best voice out of those ideas. You saw it with the three movies that I mentioned before: Empire, Raiders, and Jedi. And I think he's the biggest problem with this, because without Lucas's thoughts and story, all he's left with is essentially, I need to deliver a backstory for Han Solo. What does Wikipedia have to say? I'm going to look that up. There it is. And he just threw Wikipedia at the screen, and this really could be titled Wikipedia the Movie, subtitle : Han Solo. This film does exactly one thing creative. One creative choice is made with this film, and that is to give a backstory to the name of Han. And back when the movie came out, I made a joke that that was going to happen in the movie, and when it actually happened, that scene that I'm talking about, the where's your who are you with, kid? You're with no one. Solo. I made a joke about that about a year before this movie came out, and when that actually happened, I was like, bullet in the brain pan squish. This is just, oh my god, that was the worst line. I think worse than like, I hate sand. It's coarse and rough and it gets everywhere. This is worse than that line. It did it. If this movie succeeds in one thing, is it brings Star Wars to a worse point than it had ever been before with a single line of dialogue. Don't worry, the next film will one-up that, to be continued. But yeah, this movie is like creatively void. There's nothing in this movie that you learn unique to this movie that makes it relevant. You're shown things like, sure, now I know what a Kessel Run looks like. It's nowhere near as amazing as it was in my head. I literally thought a Kessel Run was something like a pod race or whatever, but through the cosmos. And so I was picturing pod race through the cosmos, and I guess that's kind of what it is, but it's really through, like, pod race. It's not even a pod race, it's just you have to get through, like, this ion cloud thing, and there's a weird squid monster in the way. That I don't know if I needed to know. I liked my idea of, like, I thought this was like a gambling thing, and he was, yeah. So anyway, Your own thoughts are probably better than anything this movie has to offer. But this is a movie that just ticks boxes. It's a safety movie, and it is the antithesis of what Star Wars should be. Star Wars should be, at least on some level, about taking chances. What works with Lucas's films and The Last Jedi is that those movies took chances. A New Hope shouldn't have worked. He believed it would, and it did, and this is how we get Star Wars born. Empire pushes the boundaries of special effects at that time, with the daytime snowwalker scene, and it also brought us the Muppet Yoda, and it was just pushing boundaries, and then it pushed the narrative in a completely different direction with the I am your father moment. Return of the Jedi is closing that whole chapter, but it also pushed the boundaries of making the special effects as groundbreaking as possible. He tried to achieve a groundbreaking conclusion in the original A New Hope. He was able to do something successful, but he wanted to show something way more grand and epic, and he was able to deliver on that with Return of the Jedi. Continuing on, Lucas did that. His sole purpose of the prequels is, if he was going to do them, he was going to work and thrust the digital technology as far as it was capable of going at the time, and he did great work. I honestly don't think we would have gotten Gollum in Lord of the Rings were it not for Jar Jar Binks and how they learned how to manipulate Jar Jar and Sebulba. That is where you can build upon what they learned to create something like Gollum. Same thing with Yoda. And they really refine Yoda between episodes 2 and 3. 2, he looks pretty plasticky and not really authentic. But by episode 3, he does look authentically there. They were able to get it to that point. They went from shooting on film to shooting on digital, and something that's commonplace nowadays. They were about pushing the boundaries of creativity. Last Jedi was about pushing the Star Wars narrative and breaking free of its constraints. I think Rogue One pushed the boundaries of what a Star Wars movie can be. Yeah, it can be a story about this family, or it can be a story about a war. We've never seen this aspect of it. I think the problems with Force Awakens and the problems with this movie is that they have nothing they're trying to accomplish outside of giving people something that they feel safe with that does nothing to push any boundaries. And that's pretty disappointing. I've talked very little about this movie. I do think the first half of this movie is considerably better than the second half of this movie. I think the movie should have been more like the train heist scene is very strong. If you'd done a Western in space, if you'd given us Firefly, I think people would respond much more kindly to this movie. And I like the character of Beckett. This movie does introduce some new interesting characters. You get Beckett, who's just like the posit for what Han Solo will be in Episode 4 when you're introduced to him proper. His character and Woody Harrelson bring a good energy to it. I like Jon Favreau's little alien monkey guy. He's quite charming and fun. But this movie is pretty dismissive and kills anybody that has any kind of interesting thread to them pretty early on, Tandy Newton being one of them. In an effort for you to follow the characters you're familiar with. That is Han, that is Chewie, that is, by the way, their introduction scene just makes me, it's just the worst way you could get those people together, of him also being like, oh yeah, I speak Wookiee, and like, I hated that. It's just so lame. And I've gotten lame before in Star Wars plenty of times, but that was almost a new level of lame. And it's Lando. Now, I will give props. I guess this is a good place as any to talk about the cast. A lot was made of the cast going into it. once they Disney announced that they canned Lord and Miller and they were bringing in Ron Howard, rumors had gone on that part of the problem was that I can't pronounce that dude's name, Aaron Arkin or whatever. The guy playing Han Solo in this, he's a talented actor. He was in a Coen Brother movie that was really quite good, and he was great in it. And I've seen him in other things, and I really do like him. He doesn't really work as Solo. That said, there was rumblings that they had to bring an acting coach in to sort of guide him in the right direction, and even still, he just doesn't really pull it off. Yeah, they get him to resemble Solo enough, but he just doesn't really work. And by that same token, you have Childish Gambino in the film playing Lando. And he does a pretty good job. He's very good. He's very charming, and like he's a great actor just in general. He's one of the greatest creative voices that we have out there these days, between Atlanta and Community and everything that he's brought forth with his music career. Like, he is talented as can be. That said, nobody wowed me with this. And this is all the more like apparent that like I would have thought 20 years ago that, well, yeah, nobody's going to be as good as Harrison Ford or Billy Dee because it just can't be done. These characters are so iconic. They're who you have in your head, that nobody will suffice. Yet I know that can't be true because J.J. Abrams, who was one of the producers of this whole incarnation of Star Wars, did the same thing and did the impossible with the Star Trek movies. Captain Kirk is my all-time favorite character. William Shatner is so amazing in that role. Nobody can take that from him. And by that same token, Leonard Nimoy is synonymous with Star Trek because he is Spock. Spock is Star Trek. And we've tried to live a life beyond that, and we've gotten Next Generation and stuff like that. But DeForest Kelley, Leonard Nimoy, Nichelle Nichols, and William Shatner, these four people really are Star Trek in a way that nobody really else quite is. George Takei as well, Jimmy Doohan and Walter Koenig. These individuals are Star Trek. Nobody can take that from them. They own it. Yet, J.J. Abrams did the impossible with, like, regardless of what you think of Star Trek 2009 or whatever, you have to admit that Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto and literally all of them really were just perfectly cast. Anton Yelchin and Zoe Saldana and Shaun of the Dead, what's his name? Simon Pegg. That hurt that I forgot his name. Such a gifted actor. These people are amazing. And John Cho as well. And they brought life into these characters, so much so that you fully believed that was Kirk. Like, all the other ones are sort of dismissible to some level, except for Kirk and Spock. If you don't nail them, you're not going to nail anybody else. The fact that they got Zachary Quinto, who quite resembles Leonard Nimoy in that film, but then he also embodies what Spock was. And you got Chris Pine, who is the perfect Captain Kirk. He's a love letter to the performance of William Shatner while also doing his own thing. Fully believable that is Shatner just 10 years before Shatner takes on the role. Is completely believable. Carl Urban is DeForest Kelley the same way. So we've seen this happen before, where you have these iconic characters in a space setting that are, like, you can make it happen. And Solo just very obviously just did not succeed on that same level. There was nothing about Aaron Aardvark's performance or whatever, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, bro, that sells him as being Solo. And same thing with Lando. Like, you buy that's Lando because he's dressed like Lando, and apparently this guy wears the same cape, and that's the only thing he wears ever, except for in Return of the Jedi, but he wears the same thing in Empire Strikes Back and Rise of Skywalker, and so he must wear it in this, right? You make him resemble the character, but nothing about his performance tells you that that is the same character. It's a great performance in this movie, don't get me wrong, but it's just not Billy Dee, and it's obviously not Billy Dee. So I guess I had that problem. What works with this movie? I'm kind of shitting on it, and it's better than I'm giving it that credit for. I liked the train heist. I thought that was fun. I liked the character of Qi'ra. If in only there's one moment of true acting in this film that nails the tone and nails everything right, and that's when she is looking, she has betrayed Han. It's in the end, and she has the beautiful noir lighting on her face, and she looks sad off into the cosmos or whatever as he takes off and she's not going to be there. And she just kind of cries and subtly sobs. That is the one moment of acting in this film that gets my, like, bravo. That was really, really good. And she's good in this film. She had nothing character, but she's good. The movie's just overly dark as well. That's worth noting. The score is fine. Like, it's nice seeing these characters, but this kind of just ticks all the boxes of any kind of prequel that is very substandard. It's what I like to call the Last Crusade problem, where you set up a scenario where you have a character that's very iconic, and you're going to just need to tick the boxes on how he becomes that character, and it usually happens in one very formative experience. In that movie, Last Crusade, it's in that one scene, right? The opening scene. You find out how he gets his scar, you find out how he gets his whip, and you find out how he gets his hat and becomes the adventurer that needs to get this thing to a museum. And it's the formative event that makes Indiana Jones. This movie is that. X-Men Origins Wolverine is the same thing. It's the same problem where it's just ticking boxes of like, oh, this is the Han Solo I know, this is the Han Solo I know, this is how he becomes friends with Chewie, this is how he was part of the Stormtrooper Alliance and whatnot. That we learned about from Legends that was stripped from canon, but there it is, now he's canon, there you go. Homeboy was a stormtrooper at one point. This is how he learned to fly, this is how he got off Corellia, this is how he wins the Millennium Falcon. This is how the Millennium Falcon gets a dimple in its nose. That one I didn't know that we needed to know, but there you go, we got it. This is how he became frenemies with Lando. There you have. This movie also has the inexcusable scene with Darth Maul. That's just there purely for fan service for a very small sect of people who watched a very popular TV show. It has no bearing of weight on this film. It's just there to show fans as like, hey, thanks for watching that show, bro. And it offers nothing to this film. If you lift that moment out of this film, it does nothing to change the impact of the entire film. I kind of hated that scene. And it also dives into one of my problems with Star Wars, which is if somebody's dead, let them stay dead. Why must we resurrect everybody? Darth Maul was a really cool character that we knew nothing about, and it was kind of cool that we never would, because, like, he just got iced, and then they brought him back for the Clone Wars or whatever, and he had a really interesting arc. Yes, I get that. Doesn't change the fact that I wish he would have stayed dead. He's our Boba Fett, he's our any number of characters that I will talk about in the next movie where death has no meaning. Anyway, I'm talking a long time about Solo. I don't really have a whole lot to say positively about this film. It's better than you'd expect. It's an okay movie. It's passable. But is not good. And in a lot of ways, it's the worst thing Star Wars ever had to offer. Because it's pointless, it's meaningless. Everything you find out about this, you know through dialogue in A New Hope or Empire Strikes Back. There's nothing this film has to offer besides that. Outside of, you know what, learning how Solo got his name. And that's a shame. Anyway, this movie was the first Star Wars movie to really break the box office in a bad way. This movie made less opening weekend than Attack of the Clones did 20 years prior. This movie didn't make its money back. They filmed it basically all the way once, and then they had to refilm about 80% of it again with Ron Howard's guidance. This was a highlight, the highest box office Ron Howard ever achieved. And he's a much better director than a lot of people give him credit for. Yeah, he's just kind of one of those passable directors, but he's honestly not bad. And he's done much better work than this. But as a guy who had to come in and take the reins, I don't really fault him for what he did to this film. He did what he could. And under the watchful eye of Disney. And that's something you have to remember when somebody fires one director and brings in another. You can't crap on the new director for ruining everything that previous person did, because a lot of the stuff that they're doing is answering criticisms that the studio had about the original print of the film, more than imposing any of their own views necessarily. This movie doesn't feel like a Ron Howard movie. This feels like a studio amalgamation, which is what it is. And this is the same thing that Justice League felt like. Justice League, the theatrical cut, does not feel at all like a Joss Whedon production in any way. It has like a joke or two, but I mean, like most movies do. It doesn't feel like it has any narrative weight that a Whedon picture would have. And it doesn't feel like it's a Snyder picture. It feels like studio meddling the movie. These movies are like sister films. You could orchestrate classes around Justice League and Solo. It'd be a fascinating one. One thing I would be interested in seeing is like I hate doing this, but like a Lord and Miller cut of the movie. See what it was that got them kind of fired, because I hear it was like way too quippy, way too silly and whatnot, and they were really going off book, which really bothered Kasdan, because he's a by the screenplay kind of guy, and they're not. They like will shoot one script accurate version for safety, but then we'll like play with the scene and let it build on its own. And they had great success with that. I don't know if it would feel Star Warsy, but it might make for a good movie. I would be interested in seeing that. They don't need to do the whole Snyder Cut effect where they're given money to like fix their movie and assemble it the way that he originally saw and add in scenes and stuff like that. I'm not necessarily interested in that. I just like to see like an assembly cut of what they have. But yeah, it's not very good. But my whole Star Wars saga will come to an end next month when I discuss the final installment of the Star Wars saga, The Rise of Skywalker. Let me know what you thought about Solo. So there are some people that really love it. I have worked with a guy that this is his favorite Star Wars movie, and he had some compelling reasons why. Baffles me nonetheless, but I found that really interesting. That might be a video that I do sometime in the future. I literally know somebody whose favorite movie is each Star Wars movie. There's one person that I know, Phantom Menace is his absolute favorite. Attack of the Clones, same thing. And like, you name it. I know somebody whose favorite movie is this, and maybe sit them down for an interview and just talk about why they love Star Wars. And why that in particular. This would be a really interesting one, because, as I say, he had some interesting insight into that. Anyway, let me know what you thought of Solo. Thanks for watching. This is way too long-winded. I apologize. Bye.